Okay, good morning. Okay. Peaceful music to get going in the morning. Oh, I love it. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky. Which one's which? Still trying to figure it out. Welcome. We are going to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists. Today we are going to be looking once more at the master Beauford Delaney, and this is the painting of his which we are going to attempt to recreate. I just remembered that the painting we made yesterday is upstairs in the living room, so I won't show it to you again, but this is the painting which we recreated yesterday, this portrait of the author James Baldwin, and this is the painting we're going to attempt to do today. So if you liked the other painting, you can certainly watch that episode. I think I loved how this one turned out, so I'm expecting great things from this painting that we're going to do today. Today maybe we're not going to talk quite as much about the biography of Beauford Delaney, etc. We're just going to really paint. It's a painting morning, so get the brushes sharpened and ready to go. This is the plan of attack today. We're going to get the image onto the canvas, and then we're going to stain it with a little bit of color. We'll talk a little bit about the painting, perhaps. Maybe a bit of an underpainting. We'll see. Background. Yes, and then we'll probably be done in about 3 hours from now, which I have to do because I've got some meetings I got to go to. So that's the plan for today's episode. So let's also just quick reminder to hit the like button right now if you're watching, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell because I don't usually do episodes at 9 in the morning on a Wednesday. So if you want to know when these unusually spontaneous episodes are happening, unusually spontaneous? Yeah, unusually, that's an oxymoron, isn't it? Unusually it's the same thing, right? Also, if you want to support the channel with a small donation, you can use the PayPal, the super chat function here within YouTube, but probably the best bang for your buck, or at least the way that gives when you're trying to donate money where I get the most amount is through an e-transfer, and you can do that using my email, which is on my website, or you can send a check, e-transfer, or contact me however you like through the Facebook group, which I encourage you to join. Our Facebook group can be found, there's a link in the description below. I encourage you to take a photograph of today's artwork, upload it to the Facebook group so we can celebrate in your amazing achievement. Okay, so let's go to the first step here. Let's get this image onto the canvas. Let's get the image, which is, so here's the original painting, and I've done a free outline which you can download and trace onto the painting, and let me show you where to find that. So you can use the Dropbox link in the description below. It's one of the first links. These first few resources at the top are for our introductory episodes, and then these next, I don't know, 100 or so episodes are more beginner episodes, and then the next 200 or so are more complex, slightly more advanced, but I think even a beginner could tackle them. And again, there's free outlines for all of these. We're going to go here to Z16 or Z16, depending on who you talk to. And here's the 6 files that are in this folder. Here's the files for yesterday's episode. Here's the files for today's episode. So you download that and you print it out on your LaserJet inkjet printer at home, and then you've got this. And then I'm going to transfer this onto this 9x12 sized canvas board. I like this brand. Sometimes they're cheap, sometimes they're expensive off of Amazon. You never quite know. And I'm going to put it on here. Now, maybe Well, I'll put them kind of in the middle, maybe a little bit more room at the top. Okay. And then I'm going to use some carbon transfer paper. And you can see I've used this many times. I'm going to slide the shiny side down. Actually, this is graphite transfer paper, which is not the same thing, but does exactly the same thing. And you can see, we can use it probably about 20 times before you got to toss it. I always like to just do a little line and then, yeah, okay, it's working. I hope everyone's doing well out there in the intertubes. It's right now a beautiful day here in Vancouver, Canada. But they say it's going to snow or get really cold in the next few days, maybe even today. So we'll see. Maybe by the time I'm done this episode, I'll be freezing cold. Or maybe Russia's gonna launch a nuclear war against everybody. Which would be super tragic, obviously. But, you know, if we're gonna go out, I'd much rather go out while I'm making a painting than doing pretty much anything else in my life. Well, it'd be nice to spend that time with my daughter. You gotta go, you gotta go. Lots of dark stuff going on in the news these days. And most of which is stuff that we can't do anything about. So, enjoy life while it lasts. And, hopefully we'll leave something good behind for the people or lizard creatures or the cockroaches as they evolve, or maybe the artificial intelligence which will take over for us after we're long gone. Give them something beautiful to decorate their virtual bathrooms. Okay. So, oh, forgot your eye. Okay, that was pretty, okay. That's funny. Okay, that's pretty good. Good enough for government work, as my grandfather always used to say. Let's keep that up here. Move some stuff out of the way and bazinga. There we go. So let's move on to the next step here. Oh, there's Pascaline and Lolly watching. Good morning, or maybe it's the afternoon. So let's now put a little bit of color. Let's prime the canvas with the first layer of paint. As the Italians used to call it, the Imprimatura. And so the Imprimatura is a great way of just getting the painting started, of not having to deal with this scary blank white canvas. We get some color on here, and there's lots of different ways artists have done this in the past. Primarily, though, using a kind of reddish brown, an earthy, rusty red color. But as you know, what I like to do is use my warm yellow. Now, I'm about to get some paints out here. And you'll see that I'm using what's called a split primary palette. That means we've got 2 yellows, 2 reds, 2 blues, a white, and I do have a black in here, but you know that I almost never use it. I've probably had the same tube of black for this entire run of 267 episodes over the past 2.5 years or so. So you don't need to, I mean, it's probably handy to have. I always think of like black as the, you know, like a fire extinguisher. If you need it, it's great to have, and you're glad that you've got it. But you don't, you know, use your fire extinguisher day to day, right? At least I don't. I don't know about anybody else. Today, I don't think I'm going to use my cool red today. So, I'll show you what kind of paint that I'm using here. So this is the brand of paint that I'm going to be using for today's episode. I'm not sponsored, not paid by anybody. No one gave me free supplies of any kind. I went out and bought it just like you guys have done. And you'll see that in a few moments I'm going to use this Azo Yellow Deep to put my Imprimatura on. Now, of course, you don't have to use this brand. You can use lots of different kinds of brand. You could use Golden. You could spend 3 times as much for half the amount of paint. It's going to be 10% better in terms of the color saturation, which is not nothing. If you're a professional painter who's selling your paintings for a lot of money, I would maybe get your Golden paints, but you can get away with Liquitex Basics, Winsor & Newton, Artist Loft from Michael's Art Supplies, Buzz, Peebo, Holbein, Daler-Rowney, Fevicryl, Nova Color, Chroma Color, but not Museum Color, or probably most of those cheap paints you can get at the dollar store, because they put white in as a filler and it really just ruins the paint. Okay. So let's move on to this step here. I'm going to put some water inside my, maybe a little bit much. Oh, and maybe not quite enough. There we go. Just enough to kind of dilute this paint a little bit, which is going to just make it dry just a little bit faster. Now, you could use green or purple or blue or anything else for that matter for this step, or not do it at all, which is more and more common today. Although I will say that the Impressionists were really the first group of Western artists to not use an Imprimatura, because they really wanted super saturated colors. And at the time, color, it was a relatively pre-mixed paints and tubes was a new innovation, and you needed that white to really make those colors kind of sing, and because their strength or opacity was maybe not as great as it can be today, depending on the paint you use. But I use this same technique when I'm recreating these great Impressionist paintings by people like Mary Cassatt and Bertha Morisot and Claude Monet, etc. Because, quite frankly, the majority of paint that we're using today is arguably superior to the paint that anybody was using at any point in time in human history. We're blessed as artists to have all of these incredible tools that weren't available to people even just a generation or two ago. In my opinion, I'm sure there's going to be somebody, no, the original mineral compounds found in Renaissance paintings have been proven to be superior to the synthetic pigments of today. Okay, well, I mean, that's possible. It's not a hill I'm going to die on. I would be super interested to see research if anybody did something like that. It would be, I think it would be absolutely fascinating. I think it would be, I think it would be so cool. I would like to see that as like an America's Got Talent kind of like big reveal on television, like an election night or something, you know, like. Of course, that's not going to happen because the majority of people could care less. But Pascaline says it's 5:15 p.m. in the UK. So it is good afternoon to our friends in England and Europe, or evening, I guess. 5 o'clock is generally considered the beginning of the evening and the end of the afternoon, right? Although technically, midnight is afternoon, right? I mean, technically, 11:59 in the morning is afternoon the previous day. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about Beauford Delaney. Just take a look at some of the links that I've got here. I don't want to rehash too much of what I said yesterday, so if you really want a little bit more, because I think I spoke for like 45 minutes yesterday about Beauford Delaney. And there's Deborah's in the chat there. Hi, Deborah. So Beauford Delaney, born in 1901, dies in 1979, and I think that's relevant. Just that his the date that he dies is relevant for today's painting because this is one of the last paintings that he does. Because over that last decade of Beauford Delaney's life, he is descends into an alcoholic oblivion, and it's really quite unfortunate. His friends are super concerned about him to the point where he is committed to an asylum. Are there still such things as asylums today? Do we still call them that, or is? But so he dies at age 77. So he would have been what? 60? No. 68 when he painted today's painting, which I think is relevant because he calls this painting Portrait of a Young Musician. And so when I was thinking about that, today's painting, let me see, being done in 1970, so he does 9 years later at 77. So yeah, 68, 69 years old, he painted that painting. I kind of think, personally, this might be Miles Davis. I just have this feeling that it looks like Miles Davis. The same kind of buggy eyes that James Baldwin has as well, that Miles Davis is also super famous for. And I can't be sure of this, but then I was thinking, well, Miles Davis, by 1970, Miles Davis is firmly established. I don't know how many people would consider him a young musician. I mean, he was performing all over the world in the 1950s. But then I was like, well, I didn't realize, when I think about it, Miles Davis was about, 40 years old when this painting was made, so, I mean, according to me, Beauford Delaney would have probably considered Miles, if you're 70, 68, and you're painting a portrait of somebody in their early 40s, you might consider them to be a quote-unquote young musician, perhaps. Right around this time, this is one of my favorite albums, this Live at the Fillmore, or Miles Davis at the Fillmore. By this time, Miles Davis is starting to move into some of the more wild types of music, like probably my favorite Miles Davis album of all time, Bitches Brew, which I think is fantastic. I mean, I love the earlier Miles Davis, what is it? So What, I think, is that the name of that album? Birth of the Cruel. I mean, that's a masterpiece for sure. But I'm a bigger fan of Bitches Brew. Just kind of a weirder, more moody album, which is, for me, real fun kind of music to paint to. So I personally feel that maybe this portrait could be of Miles Davis. I did a lot of research on this painting. There's not a lot of information about who this might be. So most of the people just say it's a young musician, you know, just some man, anonymous man. Who knows? This painting, at this time in the career of Beauford Delaney, he's living in Paris, which probably for him career-wise was the worst thing he could have done, because he was living in New York right as New York was starting to become the center of the art world in the early 1950s. And then he left to Paris, which, you know, from a career standpoint was kind of not very productive. It basically took him out of the conversation of contemporary art. Not that Paris was some backwater on the world stage, but post-World War II, you know, Europe had lots of other things to deal with, such as reconstructing the infrastructure, rebuilding everything that was obliterated in World War II, and, you know, various institutions are just trying to get back on their legs. So New York was, you know, flying high at that time. So he leaves, goes to Paris. As I talked about in yesterday's episode, one of the reasons why he left to Paris is that he was a closeted homosexual man and felt very lonely in Harlem and living in New York, where that kind of a lifestyle was really not acceptable to that community. In large part, obviously, he had friends like James Baldwin, who was also gay or bisexual, whose portrait we painted yesterday, and they were great friends. But he just didn't feel like he could be himself. So I just think it's interesting that he goes on this. He leaves at that particular time. I did also just want to, since I mentioned it yesterday, maybe look at a little bit of images by Joseph Delaney, who is the brother of Beauford Delaney. Both of them were painters, and both, I mean, actually, these paintings by Joseph Delaney really remind me a lot of the early paintings by Beauford Delaney. So they both kind of did a lot of these kind of street scene kind of images of Harlem and New York. You know, these buildings. I mean, that's a gorgeous painting. Ooh, I love that. I love that. I think I just really preferred the portraits that we're doing today by Beauford, but I could see, you know, potentially maybe next year we'll do a celebration of Joseph Delaney. I mean, I like these a lot. Also, I was going to say, that looks a lot like Beauford's paintings. So anyway, here I am talking about... Oh, I did want to show you... I just thought this was kind of cool. Oh, well, how do I... Okay. Kept popping up over there. So this is a portrait that Beauford Delaney did just a few years before today's painting. It's a portrait of Ella Fitzgerald, which I think is just fantastic. It is. What a weird painting. This is another painting that would be kind of fun to recreate. This reminds me of kind of what we were doing a little bit of yesterday when we were painting that portrait of James Baldwin, where I was talking about how the background was very abstract and he was sort of blending this portrait with this abstract technique, and how that painting was sort of a blend of two different periods of Beaufort Delaney's career. This one is even more so. Really, it's almost like this is the portrait disappearing into the abstract background. I think there's something really beautiful and strange and weird about this. This also reminds me a lot of the late Jackson Pollock paintings, where Jackson Pollock started to bring figurative artwork back, figurative elements back into his paintings, after having been known as the great abstract painter for the late 40s and 50s. He kind of has this crisis where he can't help but see faces and put faces back into his artwork, which really ostracized him from his main champion, Clement Greenberg, the famous art critic who had really helped elevate Jackson Pollock. And that ostracization that Pollock felt from his early supporters, when he did kind of go pursue some interest in figurative elements again, some would say led him to his ultimate downfall and into alcoholism and the accident that killed him and another woman, his mistress. So I kind of just, as I was just thinking about this painting, I'm like, oh, that's interesting that Pollock and Delaney, and maybe even Philip Guston is another who I talked about yesterday, are artists who really were famous for their abstract artwork, and then kind of towards the end of their lives started to dip their toes back into figurative representational elements. Okay, I think I'm ready to move on. I think that's probably good enough, right? I just added this little thing here as a way to provoke my own thoughts as I think about this. What makes Beaufort Delaney a master? I think what makes Beaufort Delaney a master and someone worthy of us looking at is, I think his biography is super interesting and super inspiring. I think this fellow who sort of overcame all these odds, sacrificed his career so that he could live authentically as himself in Paris. He felt that was the possibility of, despite the very real possibility of becoming extremely famous and well-known in New York, he wasn't willing to sacrifice who he was and wanted to be as an out gay man. He couldn't live that way in New York without ostracizing himself from his family, his brother Joseph, and many of his supporters. And so he decided to maybe take the more painful route, which was to go to Paris and be able to live authentically, but not really be able to survive as an artist. That's what a horrible choice. So that, I think, is very inspiring. But I also think, obviously, the paintings, I think, are just fantastic. I think his approach to painting, he's very bold. I'd say he's following in the tradition of Henri Matisse, and these very bright, saturated colors, that really make these paintings pop and stand out, that differentiate them from probably most of the other paintings that people would see if they were hung in a museum together. Just those bright colors alone and the boldness of them, I think, is especially when he is in Paris. It's interesting to think of, when we think of, gay pride, we often think of bright colors. Literally, the rainbow is the symbol of gay pride, of being proud of who you are. And it's when he is in Paris living authentically, the colors become even more saturated than they were earlier. So for all of those reasons, I would consider Beauford Delaney a master, quote unquote. Okay, so let's move on. Deborah says, "Hey Michael, I just wanted to remind you that I am 70. You are a young one to me." There you go, right? So that's why I think Beauford Delaney, looking at this portrait of a young man might be, or a young musician, might not necessarily mean that this is a 20-year-old young, like, as I might say, a young man, like one of my students at the university I teach at might be. Okay, so let's do some underpainting. Do we? Should we? Actually, let's just. Is it going to be helpful? I think it would be. Yeah, I think, again, I probably wouldn't do this on my own. I'm working on a graphic novel right now, and I'm painting most of it, if I have my own way. So I'm kind of short for time when I'm working on that, so I kind of skip a step that I feel confident being able to do without, but again, I'm trying to impart some lessons here. So I'm going to make a black paint. And remember, black is using cool yellow, cool blue, and warm red. And as I mix this together, it can be hard to kind of tell what color that is. But it does look a little bit more on the brown side of things. Let's take a little bit more blue. It's always really hard to tell what color is what when we're looking at a really dark color. Let's see, a little more blue. So your secret to fix that is to use some white to mix in there, and that will reveal the true color. I think this might be now a little bit more on the blue side of things, because I put more blue, and I'm going to put a little bit more red, which is probably going to mean it's now going to be a little bit more on the purpley side and needs a little bit more yellow. But you know what? Well, actually, that's pretty darn close to a black. And we don't need to... We're going to paint over all of this. I don't even know why I'm fussing here, but... So really, I just want to be able to capture a few things. Like these facial features. One thing that's kind of interesting about this painting is I find like these hands are kind of awkward, and but I don't mind it. There's something kind of funny about it. Like the rest of the painting is, especially the face, is incredible, and then you have the hands, which aren't really maybe executed from the same technical ability, maybe, or at least that's the appearance. But there's something about that I find really attractive about these kind of the disjointment between that there's that he's clearly super skilled at painting portraits, and yet the hands seem a little bit awkward. And I guess, you know, you could just say, well, he's maybe just not as good at painting hands. I think he's just not particularly concerned here about making perfect hands. I think that he probably, as he was painting, was like, oh, well, those probably aren't the best hands I've ever painted. But I think I mean, I'm just projecting. I think he probably was like, yeah, but you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm painting a portrait of a young musician. And some people would say, well, a musician probably sees their hands as being really important, Michael. Yeah, but I also think, considering many of the friends that he had who were musicians, he kind of fell into the jazz scene in Paris and was painting portraits of a lot of jazz players. And jazz famously is, at least in this era, is really embracing improvisation. Improvisation. Jazz in the kind of 1960s and 70s is really embracing improvisation. And I wonder that, and you hear like the this idea of like, okay, if you're a jazz player and you play the note quote unquote wrong, just play it again and people will think you did it intentionally, which you literally are doing intentionally, repeating that sort of mistake and trying to make it work, right? Trying to turn this accident into a happy accident, as Bob Ross would say, right? So I just wondered, as I look at this painting, and I always try to appreciate paintings as they are, not what they could be or should be. I try to just take them at face value and say, this is a painting by an artist I consider to be one of the great masters of all time. So why would they allow this to happen with that hand? Is it just because they were not skilled? And that's not true. He was an incredible painter. I'm sure he knew how to draw hands better than this, quote unquote. But I think he left that there as a little bit of like he's showing here with the face this, he's showing off as he's painting that face. As far as I'm concerned, he's like, that's a masterful portrait. So he's like, that's it, like Miles Davis, who doesn't really look too much like Miles Davis, but I kind of feel some Miles Davis-ness out of this. Miles Davis also wore kind of scarves and things like that and was pretty an outrageous character. This guy maybe looks a little bit more sedate than Miles Davis was, maybe especially at this time, considering all the drugs and things Miles Davis is known to have used. This guy looks a little bit more at peace and a little more calm and confident. Maybe he was a member of Miles Davis's band. I mean, as I was talking about a little bit earlier, I mean, I don't know if anybody else is familiar with Miles Davis, but I mean, this... Oops. I mean, live at the Fillmore. I mean, I don't know if you guys know who some of these musicians are that Miles Davis is playing with, but Steve Grossman, Chick Corea, Keith Jarrett, Dave Holland, Jack DeJohnette, Arturo Maria. Like, I mean, that's like 7 of the greatest living jazz players at the time backing Miles Davis up. So I mean, that's an all-star squad of players. So maybe this is one of those guys in Davis's band that I just don't know. I'm not familiar with. I know their music, but I don't know necessarily their faces that well. Anyway, okay, Michael, you like talking about stuff. Let's get painting. Okay, so I think that's I'm happy with that, this stage of the painting. Let's move on. So let's get some color in the background. Now the background is yellow, But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to use yellow or that we're just going to leave this as it is. In fact, that is like a really bright, saturated, cool yellow. It's possible that we could have just painted this whole painting cool yellow to start, and we didn't. So because I mean, the difference would have been minimal, I would say. What I want to do is I'm going to take some of this cool, I'm going to take some white. Maybe that's a little too much. Let's mix this in here. Let's see. I'm going to take my matte medium. Just a little bit of white to it. Just to kind of lighten it up a little bit. And I think I might go back over top of this with just pure cool white later on. So we'll see. Let's just see how this turns. This wasn't on camera the whole time. Okay, so what I did is I just took my cool yellow and about maybe 50% matte medium. Matte medium is just clear paint. It's just paint without any pigment. And then I put a little bit of white in there as well. One of the reasons I put matte medium in there is it dilutes the paint, makes it a little bit more transparent. It's almost like another way to do this would have been to use like zinc white, for instance, rather than titanium white. Because zinc white is a white, but it has much less tinting strength, as we call it. Tinting strength is sort of what we call is how effective that paint is at making a color more white. Like so, titanium white has the highest tinting strength of any white paint. It will take a color and tint it very quickly and clearly, versus zinc white or flake white or flake white replacement, because there are lots of different kinds. Well, not lots, but there's about like 5 or 6 different kinds of white. They all have different tinting strengths, so they can cover up more or less. So this is sort of like mixing my own flake white replacement, I guess. So probably on camera it looks like I'm not doing much of anything at all. In person, this background is actually changing quite a lot. It's getting a little bit lighter and cooler. And ideally we want to put our cool colors in the background. And I know that some people would just look at this and say this is just a whole bunch of unnecessary busy work, and that opinion is. There's a lot of people who would say that. I'm sure a lot of critics of abstract painting would say that exact same thing. I'm sure Beauford Delaney would have heard things like that many times. But as a person who did abstract painting for many years, Beauford Delaney, it's not about... I mean, when you're painting abstract, all you have is color. Well, maybe shapes and lines and stuff. But you're really trying to focus on bringing out, activating color as color, and not just as to help create the illusion of a face or an apple or anything. You're using color as it is. As a thing in and of itself. So modernism is all about kind of, one might say, in some ways is sort of like focusing on authenticity and not hiding, like there's a sort of almost moral aspect to modernism of being truthful about the materials. We're not trying to hide, make the paint do anything other than behave as paint. Anyway. I think my matte medium, that big jar, one thing that starts to happen is paint starts to kind of dry inside, like, you know, like the skin on milk if you leave it out all day. And then that kind of dries, and then when you squeeze it out, it's kind of breaks apart into little pieces. And that's the problem with sometimes buying large jars. Like, probably a better, something maybe would be a good idea for me to be to take this out, strain it to get some of those things out, and put it into a smaller jar, dispenser. Okay, I'm gonna blow dry that, and I'm gonna do it again. Okay, now I'm going to do this again. Ooh, maybe, well, I'll use it. With some just pure cool yellow. Whoa, that is great. Whoa, maybe this might be maybe having a little bit of white in there wasn't such a bad thing after all. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I'm going to, you know, as I always say, maybe I might need to come back to this area later on. Again, it probably just looks like the same, that I've been doing the same thing in the same area for the last 10 minutes, but in person, that just glows. Woo! And so you know, it's glowing for all sorts of reasons. It's glowing because it's that cool yellow is really bright, but there's still a little bit of that warm yellow coming through here. And the warm yellow also has like a nice intensity that infuses even this cool yellow. Gives it that kind of golden Kodachrome look. Which is why I didn't just paint, you know, pure white and cool yellow here. I put that matte medium in there purposefully to thin it out just a little bit so that I could preserve some of this yellow. The color would have appeared even brighter had I just painted this onto a white canvas, to the point where I think it might have been too much. And he certainly didn't do that himself. I mean, he might have painted directly onto a white canvas, but used a lot more white in there than I did. So I don't know. We'll see at the end how I feel about how intense that yellow is. Right now, I'm digging it. I mean, I read a few places people talking about Beauford, Delaney, and these yellow backgrounds as being maybe a callback to his youth when he was very spiritual, you know, went to church with his mother. His father was a Methodist minister. So obviously growing up, religion was very important to him and his family. So some people were saying that like this yellow is intended to be this kind of very divine color because he used it a number of times. Obviously in the James Baldwin painting we did yesterday, that Ella Fitzgerald portrait we were looking at earlier this morning. So for him there's some significance to yellow as an actual color for portraits particularly. Gotta keep hydrated. So I could blow dry. Yeah, let's quickly blow dry. Why if I even... You know, just as I'm blow drying it, again, it's, you probably can't see much of a difference on camera. I don't know, but it is kind of neat because we've got this cool yellow and then this warm yellow side by side, and even that's enough to pull this figure forward because warm colors appear to advance and cool colors tend to recede. So we have right here already that super subtle contrast of two different yellows, and one is kind of moving in front of the other. And that's something I'm sure Beauford Delaney would have thought a lot. He was absolutely 100% aware of and would have used as part of his practice, especially as an abstract painter. Okay, so let's move forward here. So now let's start working on the body, the face, the chair, the clothing. So where should we start next here? Well, usually what I would probably do is start with the face and then the hands and then the clothing. But you know, I kind of have a feeling that because the face and the hands are so small relative to everything else here, that I want to tackle the clothing a little bit first because those colors are really bold. That green and that purple, right? Those are all very intense colors that are going to affect how the skin color looks. And I think it would be easier to fill in these larger areas of color, these bold, bright colors, before mixing that brown, so that I don't have to mix that brown again later on if I feel I didn't quite get it right. So, the first thing we're going to do, and those greens are pretty strong, and they're actually kind of very cool. Okay, so it does look to me like he's got some pretty cool colors in here. Even in that face, there's some cool browns. A lot of cool colors in here. Is that some super subtle nod to Miles Davis and the Birth of the Cool? I don't know. Just thinking out loud. Would Beauford Delaney have called them warm and cool color? Yeah, he might have. He might have. Just thinking out loud. Okay, so let's take some of this cool blue. Let's do this right here. Sorry. This is cool blue and cool yellow. Put them side by side. Just looking at his pants maybe first here. Okay, so quickly applying that paint there. Now let's just take a little bit more blue. Oop, a little more than I was expecting. Let's take a bit more cool yellow. Okay, that paint is already starting to dry, so I'm just going to speed it up with blow drying. I probably could have put some slow dry medium in there to slow that drying time down so that I could have added that paint in there, but now that it's like slightly cured, I'm just going to make my life a misery if I try to blend that in. So I'm just going to blow dry. And that's the great thing with acrylic paint. Boom, hit with the blow dryer for just a couple seconds and you're ready to move on. Okay, so I'm just getting this little bit darker green. So I'm going to take a little bit more blue in here. And I'm actually going to take just a tiny bit of warm blue and mix that in there. That's just going to give me slightly less kind of lemony color and just a little bit more of that warmer color just makes it go a little bit more black. Let's do that again. Let's just take, I'm going to take a little bit more of my cool blue and mix it in here with that warm blue. So just mixing those two blues together gives me a little bit more of like a cobalt blue, which is a bit kind of in between the warm ultramarine blue and the cool cerulean blue. A little bit darker than I'd planned. Okay. We'll kind of come back a little bit. I want to put a little bit more yellow back in there, but I think that's probably pretty good. Maybe while I'm right here, let's take a little bit of white and get this sock. Okay. Let's move on from that. So I'm just cleaning these brushes because really what I want to do is get all the white off of the brush so that when I mix this next green, I don't have any white in there. Or I guess I've kind of mixed it already here, but I need to mix a bit more of it. Let's zoom in here. Okay. I'm going to blow dry that. Again, I probably should have put some slow dry medium. Okay. So, you can see it's still very brushy like that. So I'm just going to do another quick layer of that paint. Maybe just a little bit lighter with just a little bit more yellow in there. Just gives it a slightly more unified quality, even though obviously it's very brushy. But we're going to put a darker green over top of it, so we want some of this to kind of show through. Okay. So now, again, let's use more cool yellow. Let's do this over here. We'll take our cool yellow and cool blue. That's going to give us a much darker green. We'll start with this, and this time I'll finally, I'm going to take a little bit of my slow dry medium. Right, slows the drying time down a little bit. It does make the paint just a little bit more transparent, so you just got to be careful when you do that, you don't put, I mean, it's kind of a fine line between adding too much and then being really transparent and taking a long time to dry, like maybe an hour to dry, versus not putting enough in and it just dries maybe 30 seconds slower than it normally would. Quite dark enough for that area. Okay, so that's still fairly subtle. Let's just take more cool blue. It's kind of quite a leap that I just took there. That's okay. I didn't show that on camera, so I just took maybe a little bit more cool blue than... Well, actually, that's not bad. It's going to be certainly a shade darker. Interesting, on camera, it doesn't quite appear as dark as it actually is in real life. But I don't know how much darker I want to go for this to make it look good on camera. Maybe I'll do one more layer after this. So I can already feel the slow dry medium from that previous layer kind of starting to seize up and dry a bit. So obviously I didn't put too much. I could have put more in there. So I'm not skimping on the paint here as I'm painting this here. There's quite a lot of paint on my brush. It's kind of goopy. Okay. Let's do, I'm going to take now a little bit of my warm blue. That's going to make this go much darker. Without it getting really bluish. If I just kept adding more cool blue to it, it's just going to get more and more blue. I want this to be kind of darker green, right? Not blue, but green. And again, maybe I'll put just a little bit of slow dry medium in there. That should be sufficiently dark enough. It's still not. Okay, let's take even more warm blue. Oh, that's maybe a little bit more. Oh, okay, that's okay. I'll make it work. It'll probably actually look okay on camera, but. That does look kind of blue. I think as this dries, it's and actually in person it doesn't look as blue as it does on camera, oddly enough. I guess I should be used to that. I like how up here in the shoulder that dark outline doesn't actually go quite to the edge. It leaves a little bit of that rim light from behind poking through there. Okay, so I'm actually just going to maybe blend this in just a little bit more. I'm going to take a little bit of bigger brush, take this color, which I was just painting that darker color, and just mix it in with a slightly lighter version. Because I've got that blending or slow dry medium in here, I can kind of soften some of these things out a bit. So actually I just took I should have probably shown, but I just took a little bit more of my cool yellow. And since all this paint is still wet, I can really kind of blend it in and play with it a little bit here. And lighten a few things up if necessary. Okay. Let's zoom back out. Pretty close. Let me just get that sock because I'm going to forget about it. I'm just going to take some of the paint that I have on my brush. Get a little bit of warm yellow on there. Okay. Oh, you know what? I can use that same color. Actually, I just noticed for the cushion on the seat here. Maybe I need a bit more warm yellow. Oh, let's use that up here as well. And honestly, well, let's do the hands and stuff later, but this color that I'm using right here is not too far off from that local color that we see in the skin, which even made me kind of wonder if that right here is supposed to be part of his bare chest. I don't think so, but it's not too dissimilar from what we see on those knuckles, right? Okay. Let's clean it. Okay, here I was wondering if I would need my cool red at some point today. And you know what? I'm just going to use one of these jars. I should probably just used a brush. I don't know why I did that. Okay, so I'm mixing the purple on the chair now. So I'm taking my cool red and my warm blue, and this is going to give me a nice, super saturated purple. A little bit more on the blue side of things. Just going to make a bigger batch of it. Now, the one thing that concerns me is if I just paint this right on here, I'm going to completely obliterate the, or it's going to look like black because I'm painting, you know, a cool red, warm blue, and a warm yellow. Basically, it's a way of making a black. So if I paint that right there, in fact, I'll do a little quick demo here, just so you don't have to take my word for it. You can see it yourself. So let's zoom in here. Okay, so let's just take purple as it is. It's kind of hard to see, but you see how it just kind of comes across? It starts to turn into like a brown. It kind of looks like dried blood or something, versus the kind of really nice, intense purple that I've got here, which that's what it looks like on camera, right? It's almost exactly that color. But when I paint it on top of this yellow, the yellow turns it into kind of a brown, basically. So I'm going to quickly go over here with just a little bit of white, and you can even see there's a little bit of kind of white underneath that color anyway, so that when I paint this with that purple I mixed in a few moments, all of a sudden it's going to really pop. So this would be kind of one of the downsides, I suppose you could say, of using this warm yellow Imprimatura, or any Imprimatura, even a very traditional warm red, or a warm brown, I mean, is that you might have to paint part of that down a little bit, just so it's not so so bright. Or so it's not so dominant, so that it affects the colors on that go on top of it. I don't really see it that way as a waste of time, or I like the idea that there's actually just another little bit of nuance here. Like when I now paint this purple over here, this is probably a little, even if I spend all day trying to get it perfect, there'll probably still be a little bit of this color that kind of pokes through a little bit. And I like that. I like it when there's lots of color in there, and when people look at it, they see different things. Just noticed that angle's a little bit differently on his, but I'll just have to try to keep our distance from the paint police here. As I'm blow drying it, I'm thinking to myself, you are making your life a little bit difficult to get these hands in the face when the central part of the paintings is got slow dry medium on it, and is probably going to be, it's still, even after blow drying it, it's still tacky. It's probably going to take fully about an hour for that to cure, because I put a lot of slow dry medium in there, so... so maybe that would have been a smarter thing to do, maybe after I got the face done a little bit, if you're keeping score there. So now I'm taking my actual, or my purple. And it is a little gummy. It's gummy a little bit just because I've that cool yellow that or cool red that I'm using has been it's what's left over often from when I'm done painting, and so it's kind of dried out a little bit. So I just put a little bit of matte medium in there, which dilutes it, but most importantly just makes it a little bit thinner, so it's just a little bit easier to paint with. Maybe I should have left a little bit of the my original purple there, so you could see the difference between the two of them, but alright, so that's much closer. So you can see there's still a little bit of that lighter purple underneath. And, I don't know. So part of me is like, do I want to paint that out? Actually, as I'm looking at this, the more I look at this, you can see that there's a little bit of yellow under here. And that might be him painting yellow back over top of that accidentally. Didn't even... Oh, I see his signature down here. I don't know if you could see that on camera. That's different. It looks very different than his signature on the previous paintings. There's a little cursive quality to that, right? Yeah, you know, so ironically, I probably could have done exactly what I just did and actually kept that yellow underneath. Maybe just put a bit of matte medium just so I could get that little bit of that bit of a brownish quality in that purple. Interesting. I mean, I think it looks good as it is, but there's always sometimes you're like, oh. Every painting is a discovery, I think, right? So let's go to another tab here. I think I want to go to okay, so now let's move on from the clothing and the background, the chair, and let's work on the face, hair, scarf, and hands. And then we're basically done the painting, I think. I mean, maybe I might touch up the jeans or the pants a little bit, but we're pretty close. So let's come up here. Maybe, in fact, I'll just zoom back out a bit. Always trying to get these. I like it when they line up and they're kind of the same on both sides of the screen. So maybe it's worth just looking at that painting and just seeing what colors we see here. There's definitely some warm, like just basically warm red right in there. I almost suspect that that's what he did first. And then he painted browns over top of it. Oh, you know, he probably... Looks like he might have... Well, yeah, let's paint that... I think I'm going to paint that warm red first. Yeah, I'll keep a slightly larger brush. Here's my warm red. And again, this is all very tacky and wet. The background is nice and dry at this point, but... I think he's probably mostly using this darker color for outlines. Just want to be careful I don't have paint on my finger because I'm using my finger to balance here, right, to kind of give me something stable to work on. So it's just like, oh, let's make sure I don't have a big gob of paint right there. know what? I'm going to paint this red. In there. Oddly enough, I don't see any of that in the hands, so I'll avoid it. But usually my instinct is to put a little bit of the same color, use the same approach I'm using for the face as I do on the hands. I'm gonna follow the master here, but my recommendation would be generally to keep them consistent. Again, you know, I talked earlier on about maybe why I think the hands are painted differently than the face, and that maybe that's an inspiration from jazz music. So I'm gonna follow his lead there. Toka says, "You are the best, love." Thank you so much, my friend. Good to see you in the chat. Thanks for watching. Maybe while I'm here too, I'm going to paint his eyes, put the little whites of his eyes in place. So we want maybe just a little bit cooler white. It's not pure white, you know, you can see I put a little bit of blue in there. Right, obviously it makes the painting look a little bit weird. It's okay. You know, maybe while I've mixed this, I might just take this quick diversion and work on the scarf here. So I'm going to take this white and cool blue. I mean, that's something I kind of often do. Like if I've got paint on my palette or my brush, I try to think like, okay, well, is there anywhere else I can use this? Okay, let's add a little bit of cool yellow into the mix. I'm just going to keep introducing more and more blue and yellow in there together. Give it that teal quality. Okay. Let's keep on going. In fact, maybe I'll take a little bit of this darker color now. It needs to be a bit more green, so let's take a bit more of the warm blue and cool yellow. Get just a bit more, make this a darker green rather than a dark teal purple. Okay, there's still more I want to do to that scarf, but I got a little bit sidetracked in painting that, so I want to come back to the face. But it's cool. It's cool because the face was a little bit, you know, I wanted to kind of let that dry a little bit anyway, so. Let's mix that brown now. The brown of the face. We're going to take our warm yellow. It's going to be primarily warm yellow. Take a little bit of warm red and a little bit of warm blue. See, like tiny, small amounts of this, right? I'm just going to wipe some of that off. And that, what I'm looking for is that lighter color in the face. And I think that might be pretty close to what I want. In fact, I'm going to put slow dry medium in here again. That way I can really have fun blending in this painting. So, I'm basically applying that to most of the face. I'm also going to do that really quickly to the hands. Just paint the whole hand that way. And the neck as well. I basically painted over all of those features. So now let's go for a little bit more of a darker brown. Let's take our red and blue. That's just a little bit of a shade darker. So let's use that. Just gonna go now to a smaller brush. Let's keep on going. Let's get a little bit more blue in here. So just a little tiny bit of it. A little tiny bit more red. So what that's doing is we're just making them darker and darker brown, right? Now let's take a little bit of the lighter brown back again. Just sort of mixing these colors back into one another. Let's take a little bit, there's that little bit of blue. Let's take some white and warm blue. I'm going to take my warm red again and bring a bit of that back into this work. Let's, oh, you know what, maybe I'm just going to come back to these lips, just get a little bit. Okay, I know it kind of looks a little bit all over the place, that's okay. I'm just getting those colors in roughly the right place. Now let's take my black. I'm going to do what I did yesterday for the other Beauford Delaney painting, and just the way he painted the hair of James Baldwin I really liked. And so we know this painting is like 5 years after he did that one, so I'm going to kind of follow that same sort of lead here. Again, I could just very quickly just paint right over here, but you know, I want to kind of build that complexity of hair in here. Okay. Just gonna clean that brush because there was a little bit of blue that had white in it that I was painting, which was turning that hair a little bit gray. So I'm just going to clean that, and I'm just gonna hit it with the blow dryer real quick. Okay, I wonder maybe I should start working on that face, or the doing some outlines on the eyes, I think. Yeah. My black is starting to get a little bit drier. I might be able to get away with this for a little bit here. In fact, I'm going to use my smallest brush here. That's the closest I can zoom in. So let's see. So it might be easier just to do a black dot than to try to outline that white. So I'm going to have to do a little white dot in the center of this other eye. Let's take a little bit of the brown. Kind of went a little farther. Okay. So on this top lip, almost looks dangerously like a mustache. Just have to be mindful of that. Okay, I want to get a bit of green into this face. Now he's using actually some cool greens here, so I'm just going to follow his lead again. Where should I do this? So that's my a cool green. And I'm just going to take that and bring it into my brown. So it's not just totally green. It's kind of a little bit of a modified brown. Like, honestly, I didn't even really see this green here until just kind of moments ago, where, you know, looking and looking and looking at the painting, and then it's like, oh, how did I miss that? I'm going to come back onto these lips with that warm red and just paint that. I kind of had a dark outline on top there. Just get rid of that a bit. Let's take a little bit of warm yellow. A little bit of that green back into this ear even. Okay, let's go back to that hair again. So I like this because, you know, it's very, by doing these little dots, it takes, it slows me down and ensures a little bit of this is going to kind of show through. Now, if we look at the original, you can see that he's kind of smoothed out the edges a little bit. So let's just go back around. And not making it perfectly smooth. Might have gone just a little bit too low on that side there. You can see he also kind of touched it up a little bit. Okay. Let's go into the white. Just need a little dot, a little dollop of white. too much there. I'll paint that back in a moment. I don't mind it entirely. In fact, I'm going to take a little bit of my green and, sorry, took a little bit of my green and my warm yellow. Let's add that to some white. Okay, now I'm just going to take some warmy yellow and just kind of go back over a little bit of what I just did. I'm very close. Man, that's hard to paint this at this scale. Just mixing another little bit of a brown here again. This bottom lip. Oh, the hands. This whole time I'm like, oh, I'm almost done. Okay. So, let's... Getting close. So let's do our finishing touches. Okay, we're on track here. This is where I want it to be at this time. 2.5 hours in. We can finish the hands. I don't know if there's much else I want to do here, but I am feeling pretty confident about where we're at. So with these hands, okay, let me take my brown. The jacket is still tacky. I mean, it's still wet. Not that there's anything wrong with this. I would love a bright green jacket. I used to have a jacket like that a long time ago. When I was in art college. Of course I did, right? A bright green jacket. You can always tell the art students, you know, when they're walking on the street or on the bus, are the ones wearing the outrageously bright colors most of the time. Let's just take a bit of cool yellow, cool blue. mix up a proper saturated green. We're not going to use much of it, just maybe that is enough. I was going to make it a little bit darker, but sometimes you see it on the painting, you're like, actually, you know what, that's good. I just saw a little bit of pink in these fingernails a bit. Just gonna blow dry that there. Actually, you know, let's put a bit of white in theirs. Okay, I'm gonna go back with my warm yellow. Lightly brushing back on top of this guy. Maybe just a quick little bit on the sock. Just a little bit of a slightly darker outline here. Let's go the opposite. There's a little bit of white here. Okay. We'll see how I'm going to do a little reflection here. Okay. So we're at that time where we want to just take a look at these paintings side by side, see how they turned out, and give myself a little self-evaluation here. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and most importantly, like this video. If you've gotten all the way to this point, like the video. And if you don't like the video, hit the like button 3 times, right? And then one way you can support the channel is just not skipping the ads that come before or after the show. That's a free way to do it. But if you want to support the channel with a small donation, consider using PayPal, the Super Chat function within YouTube. Send an e-transfer by contacting me through my email, which is on my website. That link is below. Or join the Facebook group if you haven't already, and contact me through the Facebook group. And I'd be happy to chat with you there as well. And of course, upload a photograph of your painting to the Facebook group. Again, it's right there. There's a link to it. Oh, Charmaine. Oh, I haven't seen Charmaine. Heard that name in a little while. That's cool. Someone who was painting with me at the very beginning, and here she's back again. That's great. Okay. So, there's the original. Interesting to see them side by side, because I haven't looked at them side by side in a while. I think the colors are very close. Maybe the scarf is maybe the closest or the furthest thing from the original. Interesting that his head seems a little bit smaller. I'm just gonna, let's zoom in just a little bit. does look a little bit more feminine in my painting. I think I'm just going to do a little tweak here. I'm going to take my black make those eyebrows just a little bit thicker and bolder. I'm also just going to add a little bit more brown to that side of the face. Emphasize that chin. I think it's okay. Yeah, I mean, both of those side by side, I feel pretty good about them. I could glaze a little bit more cool yellow over that scarf. But, you know, I kind of like how it's a little bit different than everything else, just in my version. So I'm just going to keep it like that. Just looking at that nose. I could spend all day long tinkering with this painting. I think it's pretty good. Let's zoom in. Let's go right to the hands and just start here. Pretty close. A little clumsy, but I think that's kind of maybe what he's going for a bit there. Let's go down to the chair. I think the chair turned out well. I mean, I could, again, put a little bit of yellow back on there. I think it'd be okay, but I like how mine's turned out. Or do I? Maybe let's just say I keep saying I could put a little bit of that. Let's take a bit of cool yellow, perhaps. Or maybe a bit of warm yellow. You can see it almost becomes like a black under there. I don't mind doing it to that part because it's probably like the darkest part underneath the chair, but maybe I'll leave the rest alone. But remember I was saying that's why it'll basically turn into a black if we just painted that purple over top of the yellow. Now I had a little bit of extra space at the bottom of my painting. That's kind of where his crops off. So just turn that into a little sock. My outline around the pants is a little bit maybe more bold than it needed to be. Background color I think is bang on. The scarf, again I said it's a little bit more on the yellow. His is a little more on the yellow side. I'm just going to keep it like that. And then let's just look at the face. You know, I could darken that hair even more, but I like the way it looks right now, so I'm just going to leave it. Okay, and just one last. Okay, folks, thanks for painting along with me today. I can't wait to see what you've done. Upload your artwork to the Facebook page so that we can celebrate your achievement. And hopefully in the next week or so, I should be able to carve some time out to do one of our feedback episodes. I know that's one of the most popular things, and I'm a little bit behind on that. All in due course, and all due time, right? So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you might be on our beautiful planet Earth, and I wish you all the best on your own creative journey. We'll see you again very soon. Good night, everybody. Good night, everybody. Oh, goodness. Where are we? Bye.